This story is the epitome of the playground rhyme, finders keepers, losers weepers. All through World War II, there were numerous occasions of each side reusing each other's equipment, from small arms to tanks to aircraft. Using enemy vehicles did pose some problems, however, notably obtaining manuals and spare parts. But if such hurdles could be overcome, then some vehicles were highly prized, such as the German Panther tanks used to equip an entire Free French armoured regiment in the last year of the war, or the use of British tanks by Rommel's Afrika Korps in the North African Desert Campaign. When it comes to aircraft, there was one plane in particular that the Allied top brass was very keen to get their hands on and use. A very good German plane indeed, the Fi-156 Storch. During the campaigns in the Western Desert and Northwest Europe, the British captured a staggering 145 intact Storch aircraft. British war leaders often selected a Storch as their personal aircraft. One of the most famous was Field Marshal Sir Bernard Montgomery. His Storch was captured in the desert in 1942, and Monty used it extensively as a liaison plane during his numerous campaigns. So why was the Storch so beloved of Allied leaders? The fabric-covered Storch was developed before the war in 1935 and was the most widely used observation and liaison aircraft in the Luftwaffe. Construction was excellent throughout. A 240 horsepower air-cooled engine gave the Storch a maximum speed of 110 miles per hour and a service ceiling of 17,000 feet. It had exceptionally rugged fixed landing gear that permitted rough takeoffs and heavy landings. Indeed, the Storch only required a runway of 200 feet to take off or land. The Storch was larger and more complex and heavily powered than comparable Allied types, but it had lower speeds and higher fuel consumption. Its stalling speed was less than 25 miles per hour, meaning that it could almost hover in the air. Many of the top German leaders used Storchs when in the field with the troops. Here we see Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler as a passenger on one on the Eastern Front. Himmler's deputy, Reinhard Heydrich, a qualified Luftwaffe fighter pilot, often flew his own Storch to meetings. Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, of course, had one in North Africa, and though not a pilot himself, often took the controls once airborne. Hermann Göring, the head of the Luftwaffe, flew often as a passenger in his own Storch, but despite being a World War I fighter ace, never seems to have taken the controls himself during World War II. And of course, most famously, the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini was rescued in a Storch from the Gran Sasso in 1943 in a joint Luftwaffe paratroop and SS commando raid on Hitler's orders. Another senior Allied officer to make extensive use of a Storch was Air Vice Marshal Sir Harry Broadhurst, at 38 years old, the youngest man of such rank in the RAF. Here we see Broadhurst taking Prime Minister Winston Churchill up for a ride. Churchill had previously flown in a captured Storch during a visit to Italy in 1943, and in 1944 was taken up over Normandy 6 weeks after D-Day to observe British and Canadian forces battling the fierce German defences in Normandy. In this photograph, Broadhurst is piloting Marshal of the Royal Air Force Sir Charles Portal, one of Britain's top officers. General Eisenhower also had one that he used extensively. Interestingly, General George S. Patton was offered a Storch, but he refused it, perhaps on patriotic grounds. Rommel lost his Storch at the end of the North African campaign when it was captured by the British. It was reused by the RAF in the desert. Perhaps it was a fair exchange considering the amount of British kit Rommel used, including 2 captured battle buses, the huge British armoured vehicles that Rommel used extensively in the desert campaign. Some of the examples of the Storch captured by the British retained their defensive armament in RAF service, a rear-firing MG-15 machine gun. Later in the war, the British transferred 64 of their captured Storchs to the French, who were rebuilding their air force. The Germans had actually ordered the Morane-Saulnier Aircraft Company in France to license build Storchs for the Luftwaffe, and following the retreat of German forces out of France in late summer 1944, the French ordered production to continue for its own air force. The resulting aircraft, the Morane-Saulnier 500 Cricket, continued in French service long after World War II, including in the colonial campaigns in Indochina. In fact, most of the Luftwaffe Storchs seen at air shows today are imposters, mostly post-war manufactured MS-500s wearing German markings. Czechoslovakia also built Storchs post-war, called the K-65 Cap. So if you haven't seen one of these flying today, look out for a Storch at your next air show. It really is a quite extraordinary sight to see this aircraft fly. Unfortunately, Rommel's Storch and that used by Eisenhower and also Montgomery probably no longer exist. Thanks for watching, please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.